expected by this person that he abides to the rules which are in this country, that he learns German, starts to work, starts to pay taxes, and wants to live together with the people who already live in this country, and not have parallel societies. What we do not want is parallel societies, and what we do not want is people coming to us committing crimes. And if you look at the crime rate in Germany, the situation is that almost 50% of all crimes committed in Germany are made by migrants.
Yes. Okay, I guess, look, if we had more time, we don't have more time, so again, I'm grateful for your time in talking to us this afternoon. I suppose there may be a distinction in some people's minds between people who are criminals and those who choose not to integrate in the way that you would wish. But I'll leave that for the moment. I do want to ask you about Russia. Tell me, very straightforwardly, do you consider that Vladimir Putin's Russia is a danger and an enemy to democracy in Europe?
I would say, if you look at international policy, it's not about friends, it's about interests. That is the situation. And I do not think that Vladimir Putin is a danger for German democracy. Vladimir Putin is maybe a danger for Ukraine, for the independency of Ukraine, but it's not a danger for European democracy. I would not see where he would negatively affect democracy in Europe.
How can you sustain that argument, I would like to know, given the evidence, the overwhelming evidence of Russia interfering in elections in free Europe, of conducting, orchestrating cyber attacks on free European nations and societies. Other examples too. There have been so many threats, which you'll know about perfectly well, from Vladimir Putin's supporters, including in the state media, nuclear threats against the countries of free Europe in NATO and elsewhere. How can they not be called an enemy of democracy?
I do not have any proofs of interference, and we all know that in Romania, where this is claimed, for example, it was an illegal act, what happened there, against democracy. And in this case, clearly, the act against democracy was not from Russia, but from the government, from the present government in Romania, for example. And of course, it's very, very bad, or how do you say this, not very nice, to say it softly, if we are threatened by atomic weapons from Russia. This is something unacceptable. This is very clear. This does not affect our democracy. I would rather say it strengthens our democracy in the fight against another nation, another dictatorship. But it's not something which harms our democracy. Why would this really bad threat, this really unacceptable threat, would harm democracy? I would rather say it does the exact opposite.
Well, it does rather mark out Russia as a potential adversary and a potential enemy. Seems to be very clear. And the evidence of interference in elections in the West has been compiled by various European countries and by the intelligence services and other agencies in countries including this country, the United Kingdom, and also in the United States of America. That evidence is surely overwhelming, I could suggest, but you suggest it's false. You just don't believe it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, you reject all of that evidence. Now, look, your party has been tarred, as it were, has been criticised for the sympathies of some among your membership for the regime in Germany in the 30s and 40s, the National Socialist Party. Will you, for your own part, do you condemn AfD members who identify with the German National Socialist Party of the 30s and 40s very clearly?
Nobody in my party is identifying with this bad part of our history. This is very clear, and if somebody would do that, of course we would condemn it and we would exclude him from our party immediately.
And those reports that there is sympathy among some of your members, you'll have seen them no more than I have in the German media. I've seen them in the media across Europe. You dispute those accounts? You think they are false too?
Yes, what are they? I mean, then I want to be confronted exactly with what are these accusations are. They're simply not true. That's a made-up fiction story.
Made-up fiction story. Look, what about a very simple example, which is used against you? It is your slogan as a party, Alles für Deutschland. Alice Weidel, one of your leaders. Now, that is said to be a deliberate echo of the banned Nazi slogan, Alles für Deutschland. Is that unfair?
That's unfair because it's like ridiculous. I mean, I even think it's really ridiculous. I mean, if I say it in English, everything for Germany. I mean, what is the job of a politician in the United Kingdom? To do everything for the UK.
Yes.
What is the job of a politician in America? To do everything the best for the US. And so it's the job of a German politician to do everything for Germany, the best for Germany. And this is what we want to do. And of course, and the best for Germany is Alice Weidel, our party leader.
All right, so the idea that you were extremist, that you are far right, that there is any sympathy in your ranks for the National Socialists of the 30s, all of that is a smear and a falsehood.
Exactly.
Okay, well, people have heard your answers to those questions, and people will, of course, make up their own minds. I'm interested to hear what people do think of that. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @TimesRadio. And for now, to you, it's good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mark Bernhard of the AFD. Now, VE Day this Thursday, and in association with Find My Past, the home of British and Irish family history records, we're remembering VE Day in a series of fascinating special interviews about life on the path to victory. In today's feature, we're talking about the royal family's role on VE Day and finding out if they really did go out incognito to mingle with the crowds. Here's the royal historian, Ed Owens.
Here comes the royal family, accompanied by our Prime Minister himself.
My name's Dr. Ed Owens. I am a royal historian, author, and my last book was After Elizabeth, Can the Monarchy Save Itself? The British royal family were the ceremonial focal point of the celebrations on VE Day, particularly in London. The image that immediately comes to mind when we think of royal participation on VE Day is the image of the four royal family members, King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth, Princess Margaret, alongside the victorious wartime Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. This is a very emblematic moment, the conjoining of state and monarchy, very symbolically, in a moment of victory after 5 long years of war.
Today, we give thanks to Almighty God for a great deliverance.
King George, in his speech, emphasised the 5 long years of sacrifice, of suffering that the British public had weathered, but ultimately also the hard-fought war that had been fought and won by the British Empire and its allies, crucially. This was not just a British victory, this was a victory the United States as well, and of course the Soviet Union, who were the British Empire's allies. It's often very easy thinking back to VE Day now and thinking to the media coverage that we've seen episodically over the last 80 years to think of this as a uniquely British moment, but it wasn't. It was an imperial moment. All these nations had come together alongside the British in order to fight this war, and in George VI's message, he was very much celebrating the imperial effort that had gone into winning this war. It was reported at the time, and has been reported since that, on the evening of VE Day, Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret crept out of Buckingham Palace, accompanied by some of the guards that would otherwise have been on duty, and that they consorted with the crowds, that they incognito immersed themselves in the cheering crowds outside of Buckingham Palace, for example, singing God Save the King along with many other members of the British public. This was a rare occasion on which protocol was abandoned, where the princesses were given a rare opportunity to go out in amongst the public as though they were any other member of the British public, to enjoy, if you like, the celebrations alongside British citizens. Now, there is some doubt as to whether this ever happened. It was a moment that Alan Lascelles, who was the King's private secretary, wrote about in his diary that evening, but we also know that he was the premier royal propagandist, and emphasising this idea of the public and the royals coming together in this way played very well when the story was leaked to the newspapers. But we have to assume it was true and that it did happen. Irrespective of whether it's fact or fiction, the story matters. The story of the royals coming together with their people in this shared moment of victory is significant and important.
Together, we thank God for the victorious end to that titanic struggle of 50 years ago.
Although the royal family were not particularly important to the war effort between 1939 and 1945, yes, of course, they helped to boost morale on the home front, but ordinary people had much greater concerns and worries at that time than thinking about the royal family. The irony now is, of course, that they are central to the commemoration and celebration of the event. That has been partly on purpose. That was achieved through a very deliberate public relations campaign on the part of the monarchy after 1945, where they inserted themselves at the centre of the commemoration of these events and presented themselves as a focal point for some memory and celebration as time went on. And it was, if you like, one of Elizabeth II's great legacies that she, having actively participated in the Second World War as a member of the ATS, that she sought to emphasise the sacrifice, the struggle, and ultimately the victory of that generation of soldiers, of the public, the men and women who had contributed to the war effort through her long reign.
That was Remembering VE Day, an association with Find My Past, where you can bring your family's unique history to life by exploring military records, medal rolls, newspaper archives and census data. Visit findmypast.co.uk. To commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE Day, findmypast.co.uk are making the 1939 register free to access so you can find your relatives and delve deeper into life on the path to victory. Join me tomorrow then from 4 for the next Remembering VE Day feature, where we'll be talking about the eve of VE Day, how people found out the war was over, and if celebrations began early.
Remembering VE Day on Times Radio with Find My Past. Your family history understood. Visit findmypast.co.uk to start your journey today. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, this afternoon, Keir Starmer announced a new trade agreement between Britain and India. We'll talk about that very, very soon. There's some interesting news to share with you on that story. It is developing. All eyes are on the White House, as I say. We're watching now. The Prime Minister of Canada is due to arrive there any moment now, and we're going to be bringing you all from that story as it develops. Now, though, at 4:33, here's the news with James Kitchen.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart.
Borders, we know that the textile industry is a big employer in India. Tariffs on that have fallen to zero. The Indians wanted exemptions from the UK's upcoming carbon tax for its high emission industries. We understand that the UK is not budging on that.
It's also believed there's been no movement on Britain's immigration policy. Number 10's hoping the deal will add £4.8 billion to the economy in the long term. Meanwhile, Number 10 says it won't be swayed by calls urging it to change its mind on slashing winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. Some ministers have been urging the government to rethink the policy following poor local election results. Friedrich Merz is the Chancellor of Germany after being elected in Parliament following a second ballot. The Conservative leader failed to get enough votes during the first round, something that hasn't happened since the Second World War. Israel's confirmed it's destroyed Iranian-backed Houthi infrastructure targeting Yemen's Sana'a International Airport. The military says it had issued an evacuation order. And Rebecca Vardy's agreed to pay more than £1 million to Colleen Rooney's legal costs over their so-called Wagatha Christie court case. A judge deemed it substantially true that Vardy was leaking stories to the press in 2022 about her former friend. And for a news bulletin when you want it, search for the Times News Briefing on any podcast platform.
This is Times Radio.
Sail through the heart of historic cities and unforgettable scenery with Viking. Unpack once and get closer to iconic landmarks, local life and cultural treasures. Because when you experience Europe on a Viking longship, you'll spend less time getting there and more time being there. Learn more at Viking.com. Viking, exploring the world in comfort.
Listeners, we interrupt the airwaves to share an incredible discovery. The reason why Britain hasn't been so great of late is because the country hasn't been eating enough Weetabix. We must get to work in rebuilding Great Britain, Bix by Bix. By delivering Weetabix to whoever plans the traffic diversions, to delivery drivers who can't seem to find your house, and people who don't stack the dishwasher properly. To Britain, we must say, have you had your Weetabix?
Is call handling causing a headache for your business? Moneypenny has the answer. Moneypenny's telephone answering service blends brilliant people and AI technology to create the ultimate business PA, saving you time, money, and hassle. Your business and your customers deserve the UK's best service. Unrivaled telephone answering from Moneypenny. Find out more at moneypenny.com.
Download the Free Times Radio app and listen to us wherever you are.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with NatWest Cushion, putting your employees in control of their financial future. Search NatWest Cushion to find out more.
Now, have you ever wondered what happens in a newsroom? How the stories are chosen and then reported? There is a really, really attractive evening for Times subscribers. It will give you a glimpse into the world behind the headlines. There'll be thought-provoking discussions from the award-winning journalists and the editors, and a drinks reception, courtesy of the Sunday Times at Wine Club. It's happening on the 19th of May. The tickets are £25, and you can get them by going to thetimes.com/events. Time now, it's 4:37.
Times Radio, Business News.
And here is Robert Miller from the Business Desk. Hello to you, Robert.
Hello there, John.
So what's new in the markets?
Well, at the moment, the FTSE 100 is 6 points to the good, 8,602. If that's the case and it ends up there, that's the 16th the 16th positive close, and it hasn't had a run like that since 1984 when it came into its current being. FTSE 250 up about 60 points, so good day. Not so good in Europe. Obviously, we heard about the German Chancellor. There was a bit of a hiccup in electing Friedrich Merz, and now he's done it. The sell-off's eased a bit, but it was negative on the continent. I'm just looking down. A lot of defensive plays here. Endeavour Mining and Fresnillo top the leaderboard in the FTSE 100. Both have more than 4.5%. Not hard to see that. Not hard to see why gold's up at around about 3,400 at the moment. So defensive. J. Sainsbury's supermarket up 3.5%. British American Tobacco up 2%. Traditional defensive stocks. Others not so good. Associated British Foods owns Primark, but it's in talk with Endless. It's a private equity owner. It owns Hovis, which it bought actually from AB Foods, about selling Allied Bakeries. It's the owner of Kingsmill, so a bit of bread talk there, but they're down about 1.25%. We knew they were looking at strategic options for Allied Bakeries. On the FTSE 250, Deliveroo says it's going to accept the final offer, £2.9 billion offer. That's 200 million more than was first mooted by DoorDash as the buyer, US rival really to Deliveroo. The shares are up about 2% today. I mean, they are still 47% off where they floated in 2021. So mixed feelings probably for investors about that. And we've got the pound dollar actually perked up a bit, 133. It's clinging in there, and oil's up at the matches of 4%. And it's hard to really see why, if you take the view that global growth isn't going to be that good. But it does end a series of 6 days of declines in oil, so it's about $62.50 a barrel at the moment.
Okay. Robert Miller, thank you.
Times Radio, Business News.
So let's look at the trade deal with India. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, announced this afternoon.
Well, this is a historic day for the United Kingdom and for India, because this is the biggest trade deal that we, the UK, have done since we left the EU, and it's the most ambitious trade deal that India has ever done. And this will be measured in billions of pounds into our economy and jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom. So it is a really important, significant day.
Keir Starmer there. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi released a statement saying the deal would further deepen our comprehensive strategic partnership. Wow. Oliver Wright is the policy editor at The Times. Welcome to you, Oliver.
Afternoon.
So the Prime Minister there, very impressed with this deal. Has he got a right to be impressed?
It is a big deal. To put it into context, it is a bigger deal than the deals that the last government signed with Australia, New Zealand and Japan combined. They think it's going to increase GDP by £4.8 billion a year within the next 15 years. So, by any accounts, it's a big deal. But with any deal, there's trade-offs, and some of those trade-offs, I suspect, are going to be a little bit uncomfortable for the government.
Right, so tell us a bit about that. Who are going to be the gainers in the British economy from this India trade deal, and what about those who will be, as you say, less comfortable?
So the big winners are the Scotch whisky industry. They get a big reduction in tariffs, big reductions in tariffs overall. The car industry is also a big winner. There's going to be tariffs are going to drop from about 110% to 10% on sort of high-end vehicles, up to 22,000 high-end vehicles. But really, the big loser could be the taxpayer. One of the key demands from the Indian side was that Indian companies who send workers to this country, whether they're sort of multinational firms or whether they're Indian firms operating in the UK, shouldn't have to pay employers' national insurance, and their employees shouldn't have to pay national insurance. Now, this is something that the Indians said was unfair because they were paying similar sort of taxes in India. Now, the government has conceded on that point, but I think politically that's quite difficult for them because, it's basically saying that an Indian company in the UK isn't going to be paying a tax which a British company is, and I suspect the Tories will jump on that.
Is there any indication at this stage, early stage, Oliver, what that will cost the Treasury? What will that will cost the British taxpayer?
No, Jonathan Reynolds has been doing a briefing, and he basically admitted that while that analysis had been done, they didn't really have any intent of publishing it. One source told me that they thought it was probably going to be hundreds of millions of pounds. What the government say is we have similar sort of deals with a number of other countries. This isn't something unique, but nevertheless, it's not a great optic.
Right. Now, I mean, I've been certainly on more than one visit to India with more than one Prime Minister to talk about deals with India, which never actually happened. Now this one has. And visas, over and over again, Oliver, was, of course, the obstacle, wasn't it? India wanted visas for Indians coming to this country. So, look, tell me a bit about that, because I guess they've removed that obstacle.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this would seem to be a win for the UK side. They say that there is going to be no increase in visas as a consequence of this. There isn't going to be any kind of youth mobility scheme. There isn't going to be any sort of concessions on Indian students staying for a longer period of time. So the government would say that that is a clear win for them, and I think that's probably fair.
Yeah. There's a strategic dimension to this as well, isn't there? India is an emerging, it's a growing power. It's already pretty big as an economy, and it's been growing closer to Russia and also to China. So there is a strategic dimension here.
Yeah, and I think there's very much from the British government point of view, in a sort of second strategic dimension, they want to show that they can do deals with countries, outside of the EU and the US, that we are looking to other countries. We are a sort of independent trading nation, in the words of the previous government, perhaps.
Yeah. And what we've always, indeed it is, and what we've always looked at Russia and China when it came to the adversarial powers, we're also now looking at America under Donald Trump, where they're trying to redraw the trading map of the world. They're succeeding in redrawing the trading map of the world. And again, this is in that context.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Reynolds really couldn't say when and if a British trade deal with America would be struck. I mean, there have been high hopes that something might happen this month, desirably in advance of the sort of EU reset, which is due to take place on the 19th. But so far, there is no sign that that is imminent.
All right. Ollie Wright, Policy Editor at The Times, thank you so much. Now, it's been a pretty shaky morning for Friedrich Merz. Germany has, though, a new chancellor. There's a new report from the think tank, the Royal United Services Institute, which explores how Germany's new government should deepen the partnership with Britain to support Ukraine. Ed Arnold joins us. He's a senior research fellow at RUSI. Hello to you, Ed.
Good afternoon.
So, look, tell me, give me an outline of your thinking then on this subject of Britain and Germany working together to support Ukraine.
Yeah, so the previous German government and the new government have taken a lot of steps, principally in their Trinity House Agreement, which is a defence cooperation agreement, which was just signed last October. But now the issue is that with increasing challenges from both Russia and also the second Trump administration, the UK and Germany need to do more. And there's actually potentially far closer alignment now with the new German government that is in place from today and the government in the UK to do far more in terms of European security and also support for Ukraine. So really the timing is of the essence.
All right, can you just give us an outline of what a new partnership between Britain and Germany in its mutual security interests might look like when it comes to Russia and, for that matter, when it comes to the changing picture in America?
Yeah, well, I think the principal, the absolute priority is really keeping NATO in as close to its current form as possible and operating how the UK and Germany have mutually benefited from over a number of decades. NATO is challenged militarily via Russia politically, and also more political challenges also coming from the US. So as the US expected that they take more of a backseat within NATO, it is really on the UK and Germany to step up, and they should do that together. When you look at the objectives of the UK and Germany within NATO, they are very similar, and keeping the alliance going is really probably a mutual security priority.
Yeah, there's still questions to be answered here, aren't there? On the British side, Britain's future defence needs and strategy have been worked out. Apparently, they're set down in a comprehensive defence review. It hasn't been published yet. We're told it's ready to go, but we haven't yet seen it. On the German side, the guy who's now the new Chancellor has got through the Bundestag a plan for significantly greater spending on defence. He's got borrowing power of up to almost infinite, but exercising that power, Arnold, is not going to be necessarily very easy. It's going to be a sticky time in the Bundestag.
There'll definitely be a sticky time, and I think in those really challenging times you need to rely on allies for support. And Zeitenwende, which was announced by the previous Chancellor Scholz just after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. It's set Germany on the right path for a lot of reasons, not least internal political reasons of the coalition. It hasn't been able to achieve what it set out. Now it's up to Merz to really push ahead, and already before becoming Chancellor, he has gone through those measures that you spoke of to really boost spending power. But this is really now about spending, getting the right levels of defence expenditure, buying the right equipment, and ultimately buying it very quickly, seeing as Germany assesses that NATO might be at war with Russia within the next 5 years.
Well, obviously a deeply worrying thought. Ed Arnold at RUSI, thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up, I am now for you watching the White House. I can see it's set up for the arrival of Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister. The US Marines are there, one with their Canadian flag, one with a United States flag on either side of the pillared entrance. Donald Trump, one imagines, is going to be coming to that door when the Prime Minister of Canada arrives. Interesting to watch the warmth of that handshake before they go in for their talks. More interesting still to see when they sit down together and maybe give us a preview of the chat they'll be having quietly and privately, and afterwards maybe even more still when we see them answering together questions to the media. It is, it's got the potential for being an interesting conversation. I'm going to be talking to the Sunday Times and Times new Washington editor Katie Balls about that. I'll be talking to a Canadian councillor. We're all waiting to see how that plays out. Let's just stay together and watch it together. And after 5:30, I'm going to be talking to the German ambassador to Britain, Miguel Berger. That's after Friedrich Merz met a bump in the road on the way to being confirmed as Chancellor of Germany. Now what? And in this week's Unlocking AI, the chief executive of Palantir UK, one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world, Lewis Mosley, is joining me here in the studio before 6. It's now 4:50. I'm John Pino on Times Radio in association with NatWest Cushion, putting your employees in control of their financial future. Search NatWest Cushion to find out more.
The Times at 1, sponsored by Solo with Hive. Every
Monday to Thursday afternoon, hear an agenda-setting one-hour programme hosted by the best talent from the Times and Sunday Times newsroom. Unpacking the day's big talking points with a lunchtime menu of the latest news and the sharpest analysis from the UK and around the world. The Times at 1. Every Monday to Thursday afternoon from 1 on Times Radio, sponsored by Solar with Hive. Find out how you can harness the power of solar at hivehome.com. Hive, know your power.
Get the day's politics, business and sport every weekday in breakfast from 6:30 a.m.
Planning on getting your garden spring ready this weekend? Wix has everything you need. From fencing and decking to lawnmowers and garden tools. From trusted brands like Bosch, Flymo, Karcher and Hoselock. And right now, Wix 2.4 metre Pro timber deck boards are £9, saving you £5 per board. Shop in store or online at wix.co.uk and feel as proud as a peacock with Wix. Terms apply.
John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Now, home builders are warning the government that the plan for new homes built in England to be fitted with solar panels are not realistic. Those plans suggest that as early as 2027, new houses will be built with solar panels. But the Home Builders Federation say it's impractical, it's hard to achieve. And we can talk to Neil Jefferson, the Chief Executive of the Home Builders Federation. Hello to you, Neil.
Hi, John.
Hi, welcome. And do tell me, Neil, what is your problem with the plan?
Yeah, John, I think there's an expectation that new homes will be built with solar panels going forward. That produces electricity for homeowners, and it's already part of the mix. In fact, 2 in 5 new homes being built now to the current regulations has solar panels on the roof. So we are anticipating this. But what's happening is that the Future Home Standard, which is the government regulations for the next change to the standards, is mandating really high levels of solar panel coverage on roofs, which just makes it very difficult in terms of achieving design objectives with HIPs, dormers, with roof lights, also in terms of orientation, because of course these panels work best when they're southerly facing. So we're concerned that the current survey that's being carried out by the government is suggesting that the levels of panels that will be required on every single new home will be restrictive, impossible to achieve, and also there will be no room in some cases, in some areas of natural beauty, where maybe below flight paths as well, where glimmer and glint is an issue, that where it's just not practical to include PV panels on rooftops, they will be mandated. So we're just asking that actually the practical considerations are taken more seriously.
Right, so is the government's target of all new homes 2027, is that simply unattainable full stop? Or is it something we just need a bit more thought to get through the knots in the system?
It's definitely more thought. It's definitely, this has been going on for a while. It was signalled that the Future Home Standard will come in 2025. That's been delayed. We've been asking for more detail. One of the biggest changes will, of course, be that gas boilers in new homes will be outlawed, and they'll be replaced in the main by heat pumps. So that's already beginning to happen. That's been anticipated. We need a good, smooth transition into that. And this next piece now, which is that we're talking about today, is just that the way that the government has gone about setting requirements for panels on rooftops.